The aim of all creative activity is to build. Architects, sculptors, painters, we should all of us return to our crafts. There is no such thing as professional art. There is no difference between an artist and a craftsman. An artist is a craftsman with inspiration, nothing more. There are rare moments, flashes of brilliance when his own will may be transcended. Then, by the grace of heaven, the object by his hands may become art. Every artist must possess a degree of technical competence, of craft skill. That is the real source of the creative imagination. Let us therefore create a new collective of craftsmen without those class distinctions which raise such arrogant barriers between artist and artisan. Together, let us conceive and create the new building of the future, which will embrace architecture and painting and sculpture in one unity. We will create the new building of the future. And one day it will soar into the sky from the hands of 1 million workers, the clear and perfect symbol of a new faith. Walter Gropius, The Bauhaus Manifesto, 1919.
The teaching staff was made up of painters, sculptors, and architects of the avant-garde whom I had brought together. They shared my opinion that it was important to select young talent before it gave in to the uniformity of the industrialized world or shut itself away in an ivory tower. Our aim was to teach our students to reconcile the practical mentality of the businessman and the technician with the imagination of the creative artist. We wanted our students to be in tune with the age of the machine, without sacrificing their spirit of initiative, so that they could endow mass-production urban architecture with a sense of order and beauty. The Bauhaus was founded in the year 1919 by Walter Gropius.
The German architect Walter Gropius was appointed director of the School of Arts and Crafts in Weimar, imposing radical changes on it by insisting it be merged with the Academy of Fine Arts. And this marked the beginning of what was to become one of the most celebrated institutions in the art of the 20th century. Bauhaus means literally the building center. These were years of intense activity, frequently disrupted by the political and economic upheavals which shook Germany throughout the 1920s. The first period of its history, the Bauhaus in Weimar, lasted only 4 years. Weimar was an essentially conservative city and finally withdrew its support from so radical an institution. The Bauhaus was moved to Dessau, and welcomed and supported by the mayor of Dessau through thick and thin, the revolutionary school continued there for another 7 years. This was the second period of the Bauhaus. When I first caught sight of the Bauhaus building, wrote Ilya Ehrenberg some years later, I stopped, absolutely fascinated by it. It seemed to flow like a single torrent, like a single solid idea, its transparent glass walls forming one body with the air and yet separated from it with a sharp, decisive precision. It was not astonishment I felt at some ingenious stroke of imagination. It was pure, simple admiration. There was triumph in its simplicity. The building defied the houses around it. It seemed to challenge and dominate even the ground itself with a kind of determined aggressiveness. For the very first time, the ground seemed to have clear, naked reason thrust upon it. That sense of clarity and definition which impresses us so much in the dome of Santa Sofia, in the logic of pure mathematics, in the classical French literature of the 17th century, even in the organization of huge business corporations. It is a clarity which allows no place for the troubled, shadowy corners of man's soul. Every angle and line, every small detail seems to reaffirm with conscious power an attitude to form which we had forgotten, a determination to face the issue. This is what we have to demonstrate. Gropius himself designed the school buildings and the living quarters for the faculty staff.
The basis of creative expression is the understanding of contrasts.
The general teaching method was based on a preliminary course which lasted only 6 months. This was probably the most innovative part of the Bauhaus teaching. Students no longer spent their time copying, making endless charcoal drawings of classical statues. Their training was in line with Gropius's conviction that the experience of manual work was indispensable for every artist. It was the only way to create form rather than imitate it. Another of the Bauhaus teachers, Johannes Itten, proclaimed, "It is vitally important to experiment with materials and textures. This is how every student will discover the techniques most suited to his creative spirit."